It was fiesta season in a small rural village in Capiz. The sky was lit with colorful lanterns, the streets filled with smoke from grilled meat, and music from an old karaoke machine echoed through the night. Everyone in the community was out celebrating, eating, laughing, and dancing. Among them was Liza, a 16-year-old girl known for being quiet, modest, and rarely seen outside the house. That night, however, her mother allowed her to join the festivities with her cousins. No one expected that this celebration would turn into a nightmare. The village plaza buzzed with life. Children ran between stalls selling sweet rice cakes and skews of pork, their faces glowing in the soft light of paper lanterns swaying in the gentle breeze. The elders sat on wooden benches, chatting and sipping on salabat, ginger tea made fresh every morning by Liza's grandmother. The air was thick with the scent of grilled meat, mixed with the faint perfume of sampaguita garlands draped on the necks of visitors. Liza kept close to her cousins, her eyes wide but cautious. The festival was a world away from the quiet corners of their small home, where the only noise was the steady tick of the clock and the creak of bamboo walls. Tonight, she was determined to enjoy herself, to taste the sweetness of freedom, even if just for a few hours. Her cousins urged her to join the dance circle, but Liza hesitated. Her modesty and shyness weighed heavy on her. Instead, she found a quiet spot near the edge of the plaza, watching as the lanterns cast flickering shadows across the faces of her friends. The melody of a karaoke ballad rose into the night, a plaintive tune about lost love and forgotten promises. From the shadows, someone, or something, was watching her. Lurking just beyond the lantern light was a figure obscured by the folds of darkness and the thick smoke rising from the barbecue pits. The watcher's eyes were cold and calculating, fixed intently on Liza's still form. Every now and then, the figure shifted, blending into the night, as if reluctant to reveal itself. Unseen by the revelers, the watcher smiled faintly, a smile devoid of warmth. Tonight was not a night for celebration, it was a night for something far more sinister. Liza, oblivious to the danger creeping closer, smiled briefly as a cousin handed her a sweet piece of pudo. She bit into it slowly, savoring the flavor, the fleeting taste of happiness in a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. Her heart was light, even if her steps were hesitant. But shadows had a way of swallowing light whole. The watcher stepped closer, careful not to disturb the night's music or laughter. Fingers curled into fists, knuckles whitening with anticipation. This wasn't just a fleeting fancy or a moment of madness, it was a plan meticulously laid out, a dark secret wrapped tightly around the village's quietest girl. Liza glanced up, sensing a chill on the back of her neck. The lantern light flickered, and for a fleeting second, she caught a glimpse of the watcher's eyes, sharp, dark, and filled with a cold hunger. Her breath caught. The village, alive with joy just moments before, suddenly seemed distant and hollow. No one could have guessed that this fiesta night, bursting with life and light, would become the backdrop for a chilling murder. But unknown to the killer, Liza was not as quiet as she seemed. Beneath her modest exterior was a mind sharp and observant, one that would soon unravel the secrets of her own fate. While people danced and sang, Liza stood by the side of the road, sipping a cup of juice. The sweetness of the drink barely registered in her mouth, overshadowed by the strange unease curling in her stomach. Her eyes were drawn to the far end of the street near the chapel. Under the dim glow of the street lights stood a tall man dressed in all black. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stared directly at her. The man's presence was like a shadow cast long and cold across the bright fiesta night. His dark clothes seemed to absorb the light around him, and the way he stood, still and silent, felt unnatural, as if he was a part of the night itself rather than just a visitor. Liza didn't recognize him. He wasn't from their village, and he wasn't mingling with anyone. The others around her were caught up in the laughter and music, but this man was separate, aloof and detached. The village was tight-knit, everyone knew each other. Strangers didn't usually stay long, and they certainly didn't stand motionless like statues. There was something off about him. Liza's heart beat faster. She glanced away, trying to shake off the feeling. Maybe it was just her imagination running wild after a long day of being cooped up at home. After all, the fiesta was supposed to be a time of joy and celebration, not fear. Trying to steady her nerves, Liza took another sip of juice and rejoined her cousins, who were laughing near the grill stand. They teased her gently for standing alone, pulling her back into the crowd. Yet deep inside, she felt something was following her, an invisible presence that refused to let go. As the night deepened, the music swelled louder, and the crowd grew thicker. The flickering lanterns cast dancing shadows, but the man in black remained rooted near the chapel, like a dark stain on the bright tapestry of the fiesta. Liza's eyes kept darting back to him, her unease growing with each glance. She could feel his gaze piercing through the noise and light, as if he was silently watching her every move. She wasn't sure why, but her skin crawled whenever she caught his eye. "Are you okay, Liza?" one of her cousins asked, nudging her gently. Liza forced a small smile. "Yeah, just a little tired," she replied, trying to sound casual. But inside, she knew something wasn't right. The man wasn't like the others who came to celebrate and leave. He had a stillness about him that whispered danger. Minutes passed like hours. Liza tried to lose herself in the celebration, laughing and joining the dance circle. But no matter where she moved, she couldn't escape the feeling that eyes were on her. Her thoughts raced back to the man by the chapel. Why was he here? What did he want? Suddenly, she remembered the old stories her grandmother used to tell, tales of strangers who came at night with secrets darker than the deepest shadows, bringing misfortune to those who crossed their paths. Liza shivered and glanced at the sky, where the stars blinked coldly above. Her heart hammered in her chest. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. The invisible presence shadowing her was no longer just a feeling, it was a warning. She needed to be careful. Because tonight, under the colorful lights and joyful songs, something deadly was closing in. And Liza was at the center of it all. By midnight, the crowd started thinning. The vibrant energy of the fiesta had faded into a quiet hum. Older folks, their faces warm and tired from the night's celebration, slowly made their way home. Children, their small bodies heavy with sleep, dozed off on benches and mats near the stage where the band had stopped playing. The festive lanterns still flickered, casting soft glows on the empty streets, but the night was growing colder, quieter. Liza and her cousins decided to take advantage of the lull to buy cotton candy from a vendor who still lingered near the corner. The sweet, fluffy treat was a rare indulgence, and laughter bubbled among the cousins as they walked down a narrow side street, away from the last traces of the crowd. But then, as they turned back to head home, Liza was gone. At first, they thought she was just lagging behind, maybe mesmerized by something in the shadows or distracted by the soft rustling of leaves. "Liza," one cousin called out, her voice bright and teasing. "Hey, slow down." There was no answer. They called again, louder this time. "Liza! Where are you?" Still nothing. A cold knot twisted in their stomachs. It wasn't like Liza to wander off without telling anyone. She was usually quiet but careful, especially after dark. Panic began to seep in. The cousins hurried back the way they came, their footsteps quick and uneven on the cobblestone street. They checked the small chapel nearby, a place where villagers often stopped to pray or rest during festivals. The heavy wooden doors were shut tight, and the dim light inside showed no sign of movement. "Liza," one cousin whispered, peering inside the shadowed pews. No reply. The narrow alleys around the plaza offered no clues either. They searched beneath the flickering lanterns, behind market stalls long abandoned, and beside the thick mango trees whose leaves whispered in the cool night breeze. Each step echoed a growing dread. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. One cousin's voice cracked. "Maybe she's hiding. Maybe she's playing a prank." But their eyes betrayed them. None of them believed it. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant call of a night bird and the faint rustling of leaves. Someone suggested going back to the plaza, but the cousins hesitated. A cold feeling wrapped around their hearts, a warning they couldn't ignore. Suddenly, from the shadows near the chapel, a faint sound, a whisper, caught their attention. They froze, listening closely. "Liza." The night swallowed their voices. Fear clung to their skin like a second layer. The man in black, the stranger, was nowhere in sight, but his presence seemed to hang heavy in the air, an unseen weight pressing down on the village's once lively heart. The cousins clung to one another, their eyes scanning every dark corner, every flicker of movement. "Where did she go?" one finally whispered, tears brimming. They didn't have answers. As the minutes dragged on, their hope began to crumble. Back at the plaza, the last remnants of the fiesta, the broken lanterns, the crushed cups, the stray scraps of food, seemed to mourn the disappearance of the girl who had dared to step out into the night. Unseen by them, Liza was no longer among the living. But even in the silence of the night, the story was far from over. Because Liza's fate was more complicated than anyone could imagine. And the killer, watching from the shadows, was about to realize something that would change everything. Panicked, her cousins rushed to her mother and told her everything. The woman's face drained of color, eyes wide with disbelief and growing terror. She clutched her chest as if to steady the sudden sharp pain, but words failed her. The news spread quickly, reaching the ears of the village elders, who immediately sprang into action. The elders alerted the village watchman, and a search party was quickly formed. Lanterns were lit, torches were handed out, and villagers armed themselves with whatever they could, sticks, knives, anything to protect against whatever might be lurking in the dark. Though only an hour had passed since Liza disappeared, a heavy silence gripped the air, and every instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. The narrow roads that had been alive with laughter and music just moments before were now shadows cloaked in fear and dread. The search party moved cautiously, calling out Liza's name into the night. Their voices echoed unevenly, swallowed by the thick woods surrounding the village plaza. Behind the stage where the band had played, near a small wooded area, the group stopped abruptly. A soft glint caught the flickering torchlight, something white lay crumpled against the earth. One of the watchmen stepped forward and picked it up carefully. It was a handkerchief, delicate and embroidered with Liza's name in neat, looping letters. The fabric was cold and damp, and a strange, unsettling odor clung to it, an earthy, metallic scent, like rust mixed with decaying leaves. A shiver ran down the spine of everyone present. Nearby, the search party noticed marks on the ground. Footprints. But they were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They were long and thin, with strange twists and curves. The toes, or what might have been toes, ended in sharp points, uneven and jagged. The tracks seemed to slither through the dirt rather than press firmly, almost as if the creature that made them glided instead of walked. "No human feet leave prints like this," muttered one of the elders, a deep frown creasing his weathered face. His voice trembled with a mixture of fear and awe. The air grew colder, and an unnatural stillness settled over the group. Even the night birds had gone silent. One of the younger watchmen, a boy barely 16, swallowed hard and said, "Could it be something else? Something from the stories?" The elders exchanged nervous glances. For generations, the village had passed down whispered legends of spirits, creatures that roamed the forests when the moon was high, dark beings that preyed on the innocent and vanished without a trace. But no one had ever believed those tales were true. Not until now. The footprints led into the dense thicket, disappearing beneath a canopy of tangled branches. The search party hesitated at the edge of the woods. The faintest rustling came from within, a sound that could have been the wind or something breathing. "Stay together," the eldest commanded firmly. "We find Liza, no matter what." As they moved deeper into the shadows, every crunch of leaves and snap of twigs felt amplified. Fear wrapped around them like a suffocating fog. Unknown to the searchers, hidden in the dark beyond the trees, the tall man in black watched. His eyes gleamed with a cold light, reflecting the flickering torches as he disappeared silently into the night. He carried a secret, the chilling realization that would soon shatter everything. Liza had not been taken by chance. She had solved her own murder. The next day, as the sun cast a pale light over the village, an old healer arrived uninvited. His presence was unexpected, and whispers quickly spread among the villagers. People said he often sensed strange energies, things unseen by ordinary eyes, and traveled from town to town offering his wisdom and remedies to those in need. His clothes were simple and worn, but his eyes held a sharpness that seemed to pierce through the veil of the natural world. The moment he stepped into the plaza, the chatter ceased. The villagers gathered silently around him, curious and anxious. The old man went quiet, his gaze sweeping slowly over the empty stage, the scattered remnants of the fiesta, and the darkened woods beyond. His face grew grave, lines deepening as if the weight of unseen knowledge pressed heavily on his shoulders. "This wasn't an ordinary disappearance," he finally said in a low, steady voice. "Something marked the girl." The crowd exchanged uneasy glances. The word "marked" felt heavy, like a warning spoken aloud. The healer began to tell an old tale, one whispered from generation to generation but often dismissed as superstition. He spoke of a creature that prowled the village every fiesta season, a being known as the Aswang. The Aswang, he explained, is a shapeshifter. It walks among us disguised as human. It blends into the crowd, watches quietly from the shadows. It chooses its victim carefully, usually a girl who is quiet, kind, and innocent. Someone like Liza. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Some faces paled, others nodded in fearful recognition. The healer's voice lowered even more. Once the Aswang has chosen, there is no going back. The girl becomes its prey. It waits for the perfect moment when the crowd's joy blinds them, when the night grows dark and thick, and it takes her without a trace. The villagers looked toward the wooded area behind the stage, where the strange footprints had been found. The old healer continued. "This creature leaves no normal footprints. Its tracks are twisted, unnatural, because it is not of this world. It moves between shadows and hides in the dark places no one dares enter." He paused, letting the silence settle before speaking again. "But all is not lost," he said, meeting the eyes of the villagers one by one. "There are ways to protect the innocent, to fight back. The key lies in understanding the mark it leaves, the invisible thread that connects the creature to its chosen victim." A young woman stepped forward hesitantly, clutching a woven talisman her grandmother had given her. The healer nodded approvingly. Ancient charms, prayers, and the light of truth can break the Aswang's hold if they are used before it's too late. But the villagers knew the truth was harsh. Liza had already disappeared. The clock was ticking, and the window to save her was closing. The healer looked toward the distant woods once more, his face hardening. This creature underestimates the strength of those it targets. Liza is not just quiet and innocent, she is sharp, observant. She may have already uncovered something that threatens the Aswang. A chill passed through the crowd. The realization sank in, Liza might not only be a victim. She might be the key to stopping the darkness. As the villagers turned to prepare for what lay ahead, the old healer's gaze lingered on the edge of the woods, where shadows twisted unnaturally in the morning light. The battle for Liza's soul, and for the village itself, was far from over. Days passed, but Liza never returned. Her parents' world crumbled into a hollow ache that refused to heal. Each morning, they awoke with the faint hope that she would walk through the door, only to be met again with silence. Their hearts grew heavier with every passing hour, burdened by an unbearable dread. At night, the house became a prison of shadows and whispers. The silence was broken only by strange sounds, scratching, scraping, as if nails dragged slowly across the metal roof, sending shivers through the wooden walls. Liza's mother would clutch her rosary tightly, whispering prayers into the darkness, while her father sat awake, eyes scanning every flicker of the candlelight. The neighbors, too, were unsettled. One elderly woman claimed she saw a tall shadow glide past their window at midnight. It was a figure draped in black, its face a blank void, no features to recognize, an impossible silhouette that moved without a sound. More unsettling was the fact that it left no footprints behind, no trace of its passage on the dew-covered ground. Rumors spread quickly, as they tend to do in small villages bound by fear and faith. Whispers of dark forces and old curses grew louder. Many locked their doors early, placing garlic at every threshold and window frame, a tradition meant to ward off evil spirits. The elders kept a candle burning through the night at the village chapel, its fragile flame a beacon against the encroaching darkness. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. This was not just a missing person case. Something dark, something unnatural, had taken Liza. The family's grief twisted into something sharper, something that refused to bend. Her mother, once a woman of quiet strength, now paced the floors, her eyes hollow but burning with desperate resolve. Her father, stoic and strong, refused to leave the doorstep, as if anchoring himself to hope. "We have to find her," her mother said one evening, voice trembling. "She's still out there. She's fighting." Her father nodded grimly. "We can't let her go without a fight." But the shadows that lingered around their home told a different story, one of a predator that watched, waited, and toyed with fear. In the village, the old healer returned at their call, bringing with him ancient herbs, charms, and a knowledge that felt both comforting and chilling. He performed rituals under the moonlight, chanting in a language older than the village itself. The family clung to these moments, desperate for any sign that Liza's spirit was still fighting. Yet the nights grew colder, and the scratching sounds on the rooftop became more frequent, like claws testing the boundaries between this world and the next. One night, as a fierce wind rattled the windows, the healer gathered the family and whispered solemnly, "The creature is close. It feeds on fear and silence. You must stay strong. Speak her name often, bring light to the darkness." The parents nodded, tears streaming down their faces, whispering Liza's name like a prayer, like a shield. But outside, in the blackness beyond the village, the figure in black watched. It lingered near the trees, unseen but ever present, a cold shadow waiting for the right moment to strike again. And though the villagers burned candles and prayed, deep inside they feared the worst. Because what had taken Liza was no ordinary evil. It was an ancient darkness, relentless and merciless. A week later, the whole village gathered at the chapel to pray. The air was thick with sorrow and desperation. Lanterns flickered in the dim light, casting long, trembling shadows across the old wooden pews. Mothers clutched their children tightly, fathers bowed their heads in silent anguish, and the elders led the villagers in prayers, hoping, pleading for a miracle. Still, there was no sign of Liza. The chapel was filled with soft murmurs and occasional sobs as the villagers' voices rose in hymn, their collective faith the only light left in the darkness. Then, suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the fragile peace. "I saw Liza!" Behind the chapel, cried a little girl, her eyes wide with terror. Panic erupted instantly. Mothers gasped, some cried out, and a group of men rushed toward the back of the chapel. The villagers' lanterns bobbed like fireflies as they ran, their footsteps pounding on the stone path leading behind the building. They reached the spot and stopped short. What they found wasn't Liza. Instead, there was a figure standing silently under the pale glow of a lone lantern. It was girl-shaped but unlike any human. It had no face, just a smooth, empty surface where eyes, nose, and mouth should be. It cast no shadow, even in the flickering light. Its hands clutched something familiar. The white handkerchief embroidered with Liza's name. The villagers held their breath. Then, slowly, as if carried by a cold breeze, the figure began to dissolve. Its form blurred, then thinned, turning into wisps of smoke that swirled in the night air. Within seconds it was gone, vanished without a trace. A chill ran through the crowd. No one dared to speak. The elders exchanged heavy, knowing looks. The story that had haunted the village for generations was real. The darkness that preyed on innocent girls during the Fiesta season was alive and watching. Since that night, every Fiesta in the village has been marked by fear. Each year, without fail, one girl always goes missing. The joyous celebrations are now shadowed by silent prayers and wary eyes. The elders warn their daughters, their voices low but firm, never stare too long at someone you don't know. They might not be human. And so the cycle continues, a haunting reminder of the unseen dangers lurking beneath the surface of festive nights. What would you do if one of your friends vanished in the middle of a celebration without a single trace? Would you join the frantic search through the shadows, driven by fear and hope? Would you believe the whispered legends, the old stories of creatures that walk disguised among us? Or would you, like so many before, feel the cold grip of helplessness, watching the lights fade and wondering if your friend was truly lost to something beyond understanding? In moments like these, the line between belief and reality blurs. Because sometimes, the darkest horrors don't come from monsters lurking in distant forests, they come from the shadows we refuse to see in the people around us.